AITA for not giving up my seat on the airplane? My wife and I were traveling on a 10-hour flight from Europe to Asia last week. We booked our tickets well in advance, and also managed to book the specific seats we wanted, 2 seats in the first row in the middle column of seats. It was a Boeing 787, with the seat configuration being 3 columns with 3 seats each. We paid for these seats as it was going to be a long journey and wanted the extra leg space. When we boarded, there was a woman holding a baby seated in the middle seat. We had booked the 2 aisles on the off chance that the middle seat may be empty, but with full intention for me to switch to the middle seat if the passenger wished to sit in one of the aisles and not between us. This woman, before I even had a chance to put my bag in the overhead compartment, asked me, "Can I be really cheeky and ask you to switch seats with my husband?" She then pointed towards her husband sat in the second row on the left side column of the aircraft. Only the first row has extra leg space and requires additional payment to book the seat. She then told me that her husband needs to be next to her to help with the baby. My wife stayed quiet while I politely but firmly told her that unfortunately, as his seat is in a second row, I wouldn't be moving there as I had specifically paid for the seat with extra legroom. She then claimed that she and her husband had paid as well, but they placed him in the second row, which seemed very suspect. Either way, I stayed firm. Then the steward came and requested me to switch with the husband on her behest, and I had to tell him the same thing, making things quite awkward. She then threw daggers at me for some time. The baby started crying after a while as well. Thankfully, the steward came back and told me that there were 2 vacant seats in one of the other first rows and offered to move us. We ended up moving there but could hear this lady animatedly make comments about us to her husband from behind for some time after that. When I recounted this incident to my in-laws, they said that I should have just moved as she had a baby with her, and that turned into a different conversation about baby expectations. My wife agrees with me that her poor planning is not our problem, and that we should have stayed out if there were no other first-row seats. Quite coincidentally, read an article about a similar incident that happened with mixed opinions in the comments section. So AITA? Edit for additional info. Thanks everyone, didn't think this would blow up like this. Just clarifying a couple of things where people have said that I'm TA for booking 2 aisle seats, the first row of seats in the middle column. Learned today that it's called a bulkhead on this aircraft, is adjacent to the second rows of seats on either side, and not the first rows. Her husband had the aisle seat in this second row but no legroom across the aisle to where I was sitting. So if she had moved to my aisle seat that I offered her initially, both she and her husband would be in aisle seats next to each other, with an aisle in between of course. Both my wife and I are tall people who prefer aisle seats with leg space. Like I already mentioned, that was with a plan for me to move into the middle seat if the passenger who got it wanted to exchange. So I'm not sure what difference it would have made if we just booked an aisle and the middle. This couple couldn't be seated together regardless.
On to the next post.
AITA for not giving up airplane seat to 8-year-old girl? Me 26M and my GF 25F were boarding a plane and going to our seats, center and window seat, where we paid extra, so that we can sit next to each other on the flight. After getting to our 3-seat aisle, there was a mother and an 8-year-old girl where one of them was in our seats. We asked about the seating assignments, and the mother stated that the airline crew told her that she and her daughter must sit next to each other, and that the center seat belongs to her daughter. We called a crew member over to help sort things. The mother emphasized that her daughter is only 8-year-old, and it's a long flight, 4 hours, so that they needed to sit next to each other. Note that she changes the story a bit here, while shushing her daughter when the daughter is trying to explain the situation herself. The crew member told the mother that she should have asked AO, not sure what this means about this, prior to boarding, while adding that since the flight is in full capacity and the seats are assigned, they should stay at their assigned seat, and need to ask me and my GF if we're okay with switching. The mother argued that she asked us, but we said no. In reality, the mother never asked us, only proclaimed the seat is theirs before the crew member came by. While I am perfectly fine with switching seats so a mother and young daughter can sit with each other on a flight, I don't appreciate being lied to, potentially manipulated, and guilt-tripped so they can get their way. Still, at this point, the mother never asked us to switch, and probably assumed we would say no. While the daughter started to move back to her seat, the father in the next aisle tried to guilt-trip me, stating, "She's an 8-year-old girl, come on man." I told him that if the mother was more professional about the situation instead of lying to us, there wouldn't be an issue. He then yelled, "F you, that I am the reason the world is, F it up, and to wait till I have a daughter to understand." At the end we found out that the mother's and daughter's seats were 1 row apart. AITA? Told Dr. didn't give seat to the daughter when mother lied about how the seat were theirs, and was then cursed out by angry father.
On to the next post.
AITA for reclining my first class airplane seat? Hotly debated topic, I get it. I fly 150K miles a year, so my routine is pretty frequent. Paid for first class, as I'm a big guy, 6 feet 3 inches and 350 lbs. After the ding at 10,000 feet, I look back to make sure the person behind me doesn't have a laptop out or anything, then slowly recline my seat back. Especially up at the front of the plane, usually no one has any issues at all. This flight was about 4.5 hours across the US, and within 20 seconds of reclining back, dude taps me on the shoulder and says, "Raise your damn seat." Genuinely surprised, I moved it up to appease the guy, but called over the flight attendant and told her that I intended to move it back after meal service and asked her to give the guy a heads up. She reassured me that's my prerogative, so I didn't worry about it. After meal service, did my routine and reclined the seat. Dude taps me again and says, "I asked you to move your seat up, man." I turn and say, "You're welcome to talk to the flight attendant about it." He called her over, and she reiterated that I was entitled to recline my seat. No big argument after that. Things pretty much ended there. Guy was about my size too, but in first class, there truly is plenty of room. He glared at me as we deplaned, however. Honestly, I feel I was respectful about it, but I just wasn't going to sit up straight for 4+ hours after paying for a ticket in first. AITA.
On to the next post.
AITA for refusing to go back to my originally assigned seat on the plane. Throwaway. English is not my main language. Apologies for the mistakes. I-31F was traveling today with my 19-month-old son on a plane on a 3-hour flight. My son, being under 2, has to sit on my lap. I also had a big backpack with all the necessities that I keep on the floor and easily accessible. It can get crowded fast, but it's just how it is when you travel alone with a young child. I got assigned a random seat 12 Celsiuses at check-in and ended up being in a row with no other empty seat. Although I appreciate it when there is an empty seat next to me as it greatly improves our flight experience, it's not an expectation I have, and I never ask for it at checkup. Once the boarding was completed, but before takeoff, a flight attendant came to me and offered to move us 3 row up 9 Celsiuses because there were 2 seats available, and that they usually try to accommodate people with young infants. I was delighted and accepted right away. The flight attendant helped me move my things and explained the situation to the other passenger on row 9. The passenger did not appreciate it at all. She started complaining to the flight attendant that she was planning to sleep on the flight and that it would be impossible now. That she specifically chose this seat while checking online because the row was empty and it's going to be a nightmare now. The flight attendant simply explained that both my seats, old and new, are standard, that the woman only paid for her own seat, and that their policy is trying to accommodate young parents if possible. The woman then told me that I should be ashamed to impose all this noise on people that are just trying to enjoy their flight, especially since it wasn't even my seat and I didn't even pay for it. Honestly, I'm really not good with confrontation. I usually end up either crying or apologizing, so I just ignored her all the way, as if she didn't speak at all. That got her even more angry, but she finally stopped complaining after a while. My son ended up crying only once. I got some stinky eye and some other rude comments, but all in all, the flight was way more comfortable for us this way. So I don't really regret switching seats, but I do wonder if I'm it's true that I didn't pay for that seat and that it wasn't my originally assigned seat. To hear edit spelling, edit to address some recurring themes. The bag can fit under the seat. It was there during takeoff and landing. It was on the floor the rest of the time for easy access. I was allowed to do that the same way other passengers are allowed put their laptops. My son was on my lap the whole flight as per the flight attendant demand. The extra seat was just extra space to feel less crowded and not bump elbows. I'm overweight, yes, but not extremely so. I'm from Europe. My son has to be in my lap. The flight attendant insisted on it when she offered me to switch seats. We aren't allowed to bring car seats with us. They go with luggage. I can't afford to buy an extra seat just to have more space, as my son isn't allowed to sit there yet.
On to the next post.
AITA, when I bring my own food onto airplanes, I fly a good amount, and especially now as airlines barely offer peanuts to their passengers anymore, I prefer to bring my own food onto the airplane. For years now, I love grabbing to-go food from any of my favorite local restaurants, lugging it through security, and waiting to eat the meal on the airplane. Usually I get a simple sandwich, but some of the other items I've enjoyed at FT include Thai, Mexican, Persian of course, salads, hoagies, In-N-Out burgers, and most recently Greek food. My girlfriend that recently accompanied me while traveling while I had a Greek gyro, and said I was a total a-hole for bringing any kind of smelly food into an enclosed space, especially when others around me don't have the option of eating it. My argument is that the lack of options at the airport and the exceptionally high price of any food or beverage at the airport should encourage everyone to pack a meal for themselves for their journey. So let's see if my girlfriend's right or not. AITA, edit, I don't always bring smelly food, but sometimes I want a meatball sub, okay? Edit 2, I did ask a flight attendant on the same flight what her thoughts were on the matter, and she totally said anyone is free to bring any food they want. More power to you, honey, were her words, as I gloated next to the GF.
On to the next post.
ITA for not helping a mom pick up a toy for her child on the airplane? I recently flew and paid extra for one of those more spacious seats on the plane. A mother and child were sat behind me, and from the start of the fight, her kid, about 5 or 6 years old, kept throwing his toy over my seat and into the space in front of me. The first 2 times, I picked it up and gave it back to the kid. The third time, I kindly asked the mother to stop her kid from throwing it over. It was a total nuisance, and he actually hit me on the head the second time. She rolled her eyes at me and told me that her kid was just acting like a kid. I told her that if he did it again, then I wouldn't pick it up. Lo and behold, he threw it over a 4th time, and this time, I totally ignored the toy. I put on headphones and just pretended I didn't notice. The mom tried to get my attention, but I pretended to sleep. Within several minutes, the kid started to wail and freak out. The mom ended up having to call a flight attendant over to get the toy. Her kid did it again, but because it took a while for the flight attendant to get there both times, and the kid was wigging out while waiting for the toy, I heard the mom finally put the toy away, and she gave her son an iPad, which he didn't throw. Anyways, after the fight, the mom started to lecture me in line, saying that I was an for making the flight so difficult for her and her kid. I told her that she's responsible for her kid, and that I wasn't a babysitter or a butler, and she was the rude one to expect me to keep picking up her kid's toy. Plus, I actually went to sleep at one point. So, I don't know what she expected. One of my friends has kids though, and she thought I was being unreasonable, so I'm not sure anymore. I can be honest and say that I don't have kids. I understand it's difficult traveling with them, but I've never experienced it myself, so I'm not sure if I was an or not.
So now it's your turn. What did you think of these people? Are you turned off to air travel? What would you have done if it were you in these positions? This is Petty Honest signing off for now. Meow. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe, and all that good stuff. Don't forget to leave your honest thoughts in the comment section below. We love a good juicy thought.